Why is this so low? I need a goddamn haircut. Alrighty. Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to a very special video. As teased, this week will be a two-part special, one video today, one video tomorrow, of universal proportions. So, this is a video that I have been wanting to do for a very, very long time. It wasn't last year. Was it last year? No. If you remember back when I reviewed the Brendan Fraser Mummy trilogy and did that big ranking list of all 10 Universal Mummy movies with Lord Hellhound, that was kind of a prelude to a video that I was wanting to do later that year. Look at it now. It's May of 2023, almost 2 years later. So it took me long enough. But I finally got the thing that I've wanted to get for a long time. So today I will be doing a big giant ranking list of all of the classic Universal monster movies. I have been wanting to get my hands on this certain set for a very, very, very long time. I remember when this set first dropped, this thing was like 200 fucking dollars. And ever since then, it's been pretty damn expensive. But my best friend, Victoria, was very kind and generous enough to get me this for my birthday this year. And so now I finally have been able to check this off my wish list of things that I've wanted to own. This is a big, beefy fucking set. You could fucking brain somebody with this thing. It weighs like 3 or 4 pounds. It's a hefty thing. So this is a collection of all 30 classic Universal monster movies. Um, all I'm not going to go through every single movie, but it has the. Hang on, I'll just do this. The 1943 color remake of The Phantom of the Opera has this really nice booklet here, which I haven't read, but I'll have to give this a read at some point. God damn it. What a great start. This, of course, has the Dracula Legacy Collection, the Frankenstein Legacy Collection, the Wolfman Legacy Collection, the Invisible Man Legacy Collection, the Mummy Legacy Collection, and of course, the Creature from the Black Lagoon Legacy Collection. Now, admittedly, I'm very thankful to have this, but I'm really not the biggest fan of how they packaged this. I would have much rather they'd have taken a very large single DVD book and just have all 30 of these movies on individual discs. But instead, they kind of just took the lazy route, in my opinion, and then just took all of the separate collections and just put them in one package. Because the Dracula, Frankenstein, and Mummy collections, they all have copies of the same movie. Like, all three of these have copies of House of Dracula and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. And all three of these also have copies of House of Frankenstein. So why? You have three copies of the same movie across three separate discs. That's lazy in my opinion. But still, this definitely is for hardcore fans because there's bonus materials out the yin yang. Behind the scenes documentaries. This also does include the 1931 Spanish edition of Dracula. Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, and Lon Chaney Jr. and Jack Pierce featurettes, 13 expert feature commentaries, archival footage, production photographs, and tons of theatrical trailers, plus more. So if you're a fan of the classic Universal horror cycle, this collection is definitely the thing to get. Not that generic basic Universal Essentials collection that just has 8 movies, but they redo the same fucking thing over and over again. There is a DVD version, a Blu-ray version, and a 4K version that has Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, the Wolf Man, Bride of Frankenstein, and probably, I don't know, oh yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon. They've redone that same collection of movies so many times it's not even funny. But yeah, this is definitely the one to have. Oh wow, you are way behind. Anthony Serkis has the Blu-ray collection. This is just the DVD version. This was the cheaper of the two. But Texas guy has only seen Creature from the Black Lagoon. Yeah, you're very far behind. So after arduously wading through this entire collection, I'd seen a fair chunk, but I still had not seen quite a few of these beforehand. I used to own the Frankenstein, Mummy, and Creature from the Black Lagoon sets, but I never had Dracula, Wolfman, or the Invisible Man because of that problem, because they share movies. But still, I figured, you know what? It's time for me to get this because I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Today, I will be taking most of these movies and ranking them from worst to best. So, the only one of this set that I will not be including in this ranking list is The Phantom of the Opera, because it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb because it's the one movie that is in color. Literally is the one film that is in color. But the main reason I'm not including this, I didn't finish this. I got 25 minutes into this movie, and for some reason, this was the last one of the set that I did watch. I couldn't finish it. I was so burned out on all these movies. I just could not do it. Not to mention, I've never really considered The Phantom of the Opera to be much of a horror film. Oh man. Hold on. Anyway, so I didn't finish Phantom of the Opera. I just couldn't get into it. I've never considered the Phantom of the Opera to be a monster, really. But also I just don't call this a horror movie, in my opinion. It's just not. It may have some gothic, chilling elements to it, but it's always come off more as a romantic film in my eyes. But that will be compensated by I am including the Spanish version of Dracula as its own separate thing. Even though the film uses the same script and the same sets as the English version, I do consider them to be like the Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League. They use the same script, but they do enough to be different in and of themselves. So, yeah. I am, of course, a big fan of the classic Universal monster movies. I do like a fair bit of these movies. That being said, though, I have come to realize that they're definitely dated. Classic Universal monster movies, there's a few that I really do like, but a lot of these do kind of blend together. And they all share, no pun intended, universal problems. But I am very thankful to finally have this complete collection. Again, thank you very much to my best friend Victoria. Um, this is like one of the biggest crown jewels now of my movie collection. I will not be taking this thing apart. I'm going to keep this in its box. I just wish the DVD setup was better. But yeah, this is one of the biggest crown jewels. This will be going next to my Criterion Godzilla collection. Um, yeah, I do like this set. And I am a fan of Universal monster movies. So we have 30 movies here to rank from worst to best. And once again, fair warning, there's going to be some opinions. No, I have not seen Renfield. I want to. Yeah, I definitely want to. But yeah, there's going to be some opinions regarding these movies that are going to be ruffling some feathers. Because how could I have it any other way? I am me, after all. So take it in stride. Don't be a Star Wars fan. Just, accept that there's different opinions out there. And there are going to be some movies on this list that are going to be very low, and certain people are going to be big fans of them. And yeah, and I'm not going to be. So, with all that being said, word from our sponsor has been spoken. That's good. So let us rank all, technically, yeah, 30 of the classic Universal monster movies. Coming in at the very bottom of the barrel, the absolute worst of all these movies. Now I will say, like, none of these movies really pissed me off in any way or angered me. Well, no, there are some of these I didn't really enjoy, but for the most part, I consider most of these movies to be relatively pretty harmless. Also, pardon my light if it keeps flickering. It's very windy and rainy here right now. But a lot of these movies are pretty harmless, but these bottom 5 or 6 definitely were rough sits. And the roughest of all, coming in at number 30, is She Wolf of London. Why the hell is this even on this list? This is not a werewolf movie, as the poster and trailer will lead you to believe. This movie is 1 hour long. There's no werewolf. There's no supernatural elements. It's a lame ass murder mystery movie in the guise of somewhat being like a werewolf film. All just in the lame plot of a maid trying to kill an owner of a house so that she doesn't have to move and go somewhere else. So she frames the owner to make it look like she might be a werewolf. Lame as fuck. She-Wolf of London is not a horror movie. It's not a good movie. It's 1 hour long. It's lame. It's stupid. It's boring. It's slow. It's cliche, and it's completely pointless. I fell asleep through at least 20 minutes of this movie, and I was pissed because I had to rewind what I fell asleep through so that I could watch the whole goddamn movie. This was a rough fucking sit. Let me tell you what. Coming in at number 29 is Werewolf of London from 1935. This technically was Universal's very first werewolf movie, predating The Wolfman by 6 years. And it's not really good at all. I didn't really enjoy a single thing about this, other than there was one scene showcasing the werewolf transformation. I liked how it was shot, and at least this movie has shots of the full moon, unlike the original Wolfman. But outside of that, The characters are flat, the story plods along. There's not really much of a body count. The werewolf is not scary. There's not really any good suspense. The ending is incredibly anticlimactic and lame. I just did not like Werewolf of London. This was probably the most disappointing because I had heard of Werewolf of London for years, and I remember the plot to the movie did sound somewhat intriguing, but just overall, this was very disappointing. I wanted to like this movie more, but in the end, nah, just didn't do it for me. By the way, this might not be a super long video because a lot of these movies, real quick too, I actually meant to have a much larger list in mind, but I realized a lot of these movies I just don't have very much to say about. Um, so that's why I've decided to keep all the classic Universal monsters in its own list. Wink, wink. This is going to be probably the first very controversial pick. At number 28 is a tie. Hang on. Is it? One, two. Hang on. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I guess it's 29. But technically, it is still 30 movies, but we have 29 spots here. At number 27, She Wolf of London's 29, which is the worst. Right below that is Werewolf of London at 28. So coming in at number 27 is a tie of both versions of the original Dracula from 1931, the Lugosi cut and the Spanish cut. Both suck. I do not like the original Dracula really whatsoever. Sure, Bela Lugosi is fun to watch as Dracula, but the problem is that he's the only good thing about the movie. But unfortunately, he's not strong enough to carry the movie all by himself, mainly because he's not in it as much as he should be. Because the movie and characters around him are as dry as the Sahara Desert and boring as a plank of wood. All four of the human characters are boring and underdeveloped as fuck. With the possible slight exception of Edward Van Sloan, he is a good actor, but he doesn't have much to do. And the rest of the human characters are flat as a plateau. Um, Not very much happens. There's not very much action. The special effects are quite poor, and the lack of a musical score is painfully jarring and distracting. The Spanish version of Dracula is better on a technical scale. It's more well shot. The actors give better performances, in my opinion. Yeah, and I like Carlos Villarreal better as Dracula. He hella looks like Nicolas Cage. Speaking of Renfield, um, it has a lot more added scenes, so it feels more like a cohesive movie, and it feels more like a complete movie. That's another big issue with the Lugosi version. It's only an hour and 18 minutes, whereas the Spanish version is an hour and 43 minutes. So that makes it feel like a complete movie, but the problem is that it's still using the same script. All the characters are still flat as a plateau. Dracula is in it a little bit more, but he's still underused. And the lack of a music score is jarring and distracting, and the movie still, in and of itself, outside of Dracula, is as dry as the Sahara Desert. It just doesn't work for me. Coming in right below that at number 26 is Dracula's Daughter. The only thing I really like about this, I like how well it picks up right when the last movie left off. I like the character of Countess Maria Zaleska, Dracula's daughter, and I like her servant Clove. I think that's it. No, Sander, excuse me. Clove is Dracula Prince of Darkness. Ironically enough, I'm watching Hammer horror films right now too. Yeah, I like her servant Sander. He's funny. What do you see in my eyes? Death. The wings of bats barking because there are wolves about. Sanders funny, but outside of that, once again, the movie is dry as the Sahara Desert. Um, there's barely any action. It's not scary. It's not tense. It's not suspenseful. It's just flat as a plateau for me. And it has it in one of the most jarring and abrupt anticlimactic endings of all Universal horror movies. This one was particularly pathetic. At number 25 is The Invisible Woman, the third Invisible film. This wasn't technically a bad movie. It has good special effects and a decent script, but the problem, it's not a horror film whatsoever, and it sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of the Invisible Man series, not because it's the Invisible Woman, but because it doesn't fit into the continuity whatsoever. It feels like it was just an unrelated script that was then just shoehorned into being part of the Universal series or the Universal Invisible series just for marquee value. Um, if you watch it as a comedy, it is a funny movie, but it's just at times it is kind of a snooze fest as well. Cause like there's periods where it's boring as fuck, but then there's breaks where the movie tries to be funny because the invisible concept lends itself to being funny, slapsticky at least. But in the overall scale of the franchise, The Invisible Woman is also, in my opinion, very just kind of forgettable. Um, this one wasn't quite a chore to sit through, but it just left very little to no impact on me once it was over. I was just like, okay, that sure existed for an hour and 20 minutes. Coming in below that is now The Invisible Woman. I didn't think was a bad movie. But this next one was kind of a tough one to sit through. I fell asleep during this one too. Is The Invisible Man's Revenge coming in at number 24. Again, if you don't count The Invisible Woman as part of the rest of the series, The Invisible Man's Revenge is definitely my least favorite. There's no continuity whatsoever. Um, all of the main characters in this movie are incredibly unlikable, including the Invisible Man himself. He's just an evil, despicable, greedy, asshole anti-hero dude, but he's just a total douche. Um, but yeah, very unlikely. That's the main issue with this. It also just feels kind of pointless, and at this point, definitely was when the Invisible Man series was really, really, really starting to get old. And all of the comedic elements of the power of invisibility at this point was starting to really wear out its welcome. And this one just doesn't really feel like it progresses the franchise far enough. It's just another Invisible Man movie. Whoop de goddamn do. Coming in at number 23 is a golden oldie, The Mummy's Tomb. This is still my least favorite mummy movie. Um, it has a very pointless and superfluous storyline. It has the most boring characters. It's I think it might just be the shortest of all the mummy movies. The middle 3 mummy movies are all just over an hour long, but I really do think this is the one that this one feels the shortest because of the fact that this being its biggest problem, it has 11 minutes of stock footage at the very beginning. So the rest of the 49 minutes of the movie also add nothing to the movie. So this is the one that just feels like it's the weakest mummy film in my opinion. So yeah, Mummy's Tomb, still not a great movie. It is fun, a couple scenes watching Karis walk around and kill people, and it's cool to see the first time uh, Lon Chaney Jr. as the Mummy. But this one just is the most forgettable of all the Mummy films. Coming in at number 22 is Invisible Agent. This one also kind of feels a bit pointless for the rest of the Invisible Man series. And it screams of being a World War II propaganda movie. Holy motherfucking shit, does it just scream World War II. But the concept of an invisible man does lend itself fairly well to being like a espionage spy action movie for the 1940s. And it does do that for the most part. It's somewhat entertaining, but it also just feels kind of superfluous to the rest of the series. Again, has a very anticlimactic, underwhelming finale. But it also really messes with the continuity of the rest of the Invisible Man series. They can't decide on whether the Invisible Agent's grandfather or his uncle was the creator of the Invisible Man formula. Not a terrible movie by any means, but just it's watchable, but not great. Coming in at number 21 is the original Frankenstein. This is my least favorite Frankenstein film, without a shadow of a doubt. It suffers from a lot of the same problems as Dracula, which came out this same year. Very bland and underwhelming characters. Not quite as much because Colin Clive is at least entertaining to watch as Henry Frankenstein. And Edward Van Sloan is a little bit more charismatic and entertaining to watch in this movie than he is in Dracula. But the script is still kind of just dry and flat. Um, the characters are underwhelming and unmemorable, except for Boris Karloff as the Frankenstein monster. But even still, I do think this is Boris Karloff's weakest performance as the monster. Um, because this movie feels very much like the first act of a two-part story. And this is the one that just does the least for me. And again, the lack of a musical score is distractingly jarring and annoying. This one not quite as much as Dracula because there's at least a lot of background noise to go along with the silence to kind of muffle it. But still, when there are moments of silence, it is drastic or not drastic. It is distracting and jarring. So yeah, Frankenstein just doesn't quite do it for me. And once again, very abrupt, anticlimactic ending. Coming in at number 20 is The Mummy's Curse. The final Karras mummy film. Once again, suffers from a lot of the same problems as The Mummy's Tomb. Uses a lot of stock footage, has very bland, weak characters. Not quite as much of a pointless story, but kind of similarly. The Mummy's Tomb and The Mummy's Curse have the most in common with each other, in my opinion. The swamp setting is a refreshing change of pace. Um, Lon Chaney Jr. does give a decent performance as Karis. And there are some decent moments of action and suspense. And watching Ananka rise from the swamp in her mummy form is a spooky image. But as a finale for the Karis Mummy series, it's very stale, dry, and flat, almost as much as the mummy himself. Coming in at number 19 is House of Dracula. Uh this just feels like the Frankenstein series was really starting to run out of steam. Initially, this movie was much, much lower on the list before I saw the other 12 Universal Monster movies that I hadn't seen. I still do think this is one of the weaker installments, but it does incorporate Dracula into its story much better than its predecessor. And while it's not quite as engrossing of another Wolfman film, the Wolfman stuff here is still entertaining. And it is also refreshing after four movies at this point of Lon Chaney Jr. just dying tragically as the Wolfman. This movie gives Larry Talbot a happy ending by having him be cured of his werewolfism. Like, you know what? Finally, after five movies of him, or four movies of him just dying as the Wolfman, it's nice to see Larry Talbot finally have a happy ending. So good on him. And Dr. Edelman is certainly probably the closest to a legit universal version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that we've ever seen. So he is fun to watch. Just still, House of Dracula just feels like the series overstaying its welcome at this point. Coming in at number 18 is The Creature Walks Among Us, the third and final Creature from the Black Lagoon movie. This one has an interesting premise. But it's just a very once again, it's well, actually it is literally because the creature is an aquatic monster, but he's taken out of the water for most of this movie, so it is a very dry, flat movie. And at this point too, it's kind of painfully mean-spirited because all these Creature from the Black Lagoon movies, the biggest victim of all is the creature himself, the Gill Man. And now he's literally forcibly taken out of his home and forcibly transformed into something that he's not supposed to be. Um, it's also just very tedious and dull. Like it's the third Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, yet for most of the film, the big focus is just watching 1950s marriage squabbles. That's not fun to watch. The only scene in this movie that is entertaining is when the Gill Man finally gets loose from his enclosure and goes on an Incredible Hulk style rampage, destroying his habitat and the house right next to him. And the movie really ends on a tragic, downbeat note, implying that the Gill Man will just walk his way into the ocean just to drown because he's no longer able to breathe underwater because he walks among us. Okay, sorry. What I think they should have done if this was to be the final creature movie, I would have much so they established earlier in the movie the Gill Man gets covered in gasoline and he gets set on fire. So his gills are so damaged that he can't breathe. But then it's discovered he has a pair of vestigial air lungs. So they perform surgery on him, remove his gills, his claws, and his fish scales, and transform him into being more human like. But then, at the cost of that, he can no longer swim or breathe underwater. But I would have preferred they imply at the end of this movie, like there's little slits that are starting to grow on the back of his head, implying that the creature's gills grow back so that he can go back to being underwater. So that way it doesn't feel as tragic and sad as the movie currently stands. But here it just comes off like the creature is just going to go off and commit suicide because he can't live life the way that he was intended to do. Yeah, not a great movie. Honestly, feel like this probably should have been lower, but it is a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, him being my favorite monster of all of them. So it is still somewhat entertaining, but as a finale to the Creature series, it's not that great. Coming in at number 17 is The Invisible Man, the original. This one is okay, but in my opinion, I think it has two really good first acts. Claude Rains is a joy to watch as the Invisible Man, but man, this did not have a great third act. It felt very rushed and truncated. For being only an hour and 11 minutes long, it's really the first hour that's the most entertaining. The last 11 minutes, the movie takes a very sharp nosedive downhill. Amazing special effects for its time, really good humor, great music, and a great performance by Claude Rains as the Invisible Man. I just think it's very imbalanced. It's that last 10 minutes that just really, really hurt this movie, in my opinion. Coming in at number 16 is The Mummy's Ghost, the third Karras mummy film. I still stand by. This is Lon Chaney Jr.'s best performance as Karras. I think this might have the highest body count too. Um, and definitely, it's a joy to watch John Carradine as Yosef Bey. John Carradine's always fun to watch. He was also in The Invisible Man's Revenge, but he was very underused. Another reason why that movie doesn't work. Um, Still though, this one is just it feels a bit like a retread of the Wolfman, especially with it reusing a lot of music from the Wolfman, and it just feels like more of the same. It's just another mummy movie. Whoop de goddamn do. It's entertaining enough though. Still, as you can see, some of these movies I just don't have much to say about. Coming in at number 15, this is when things are starting to slowly go towards more positive feelings. Coming in at number 15 is Son of Dracula. Dubiously titled because it's not really a Son of Dracula movie. The movie can't decide on whether the vampire in this movie is Count Alucard or just Count Dracula. By the end of it, they just start calling him Dracula. It introduces the concept of Dracula's son being named Alucard, whom has become a famous character in and of himself, mostly through Castlevania, but that's cool though. Um, this also has a fun swamp setting, which I really like, and it feels more like a modern day, at this point, vampire movie, like showing off some more special effects. Um, Showing off more abilities, like Dracula is immune to gunfire. Let's see, call him Dracula. He can transform into a bat and he can transform into mist. So that's cool. It's exploring more abilities for vampires in this movie. Um, And it's interesting to see Lon Chaney Jr. playing a more villainous role this time around. Um, this one just felt kind of meh. It's not a bad movie by any means, but it was just kind of okay. Still enjoyable though, somewhat. Coming in at number 14, this along with one below this. So we're going to go on a quartet of Frankenstein films, the weakest of which at number 14, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. This was a first time watch for me when I first got this. I used to have all the Frankenstein movies on its own individual set, but I could just never get around to watching Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. I see why now. This was kind of disappointing. Um Mostly due now as a sequel to The Wolfman, this movie's quite entertaining. And I think it works best as a sequel to The Wolfman. But unfortunately, once the Frankenstein monster is introduced in the movie, I think that's when the movie starts going downhill. Mostly due to the fact that the monster is played poorly, painfully by Bela Lugosi. He was not fit to be playing this kind of role at this point, at this late in his career. And the titular fight between the Frankenstein monster and the Wolfman, it is cool in concept, but it's saved for the last 5 minutes of the fucking movie. Lame. The fight should have been longer. It should have been introduced earlier in the movie, and it shouldn't have been so goddamn rushed. I can see the historical significance of this movie, and I can appreciate it. This was the first time there was ever a monster crossover. I just don't think it was the best effort. Wasn't the best first effort. I actually think King Kong versus Godzilla did that kind of thing way better. Can't believe I'm saying that. Ironically, another Universal movie. That will not be included on this list, by the way. Neither will Tarantula or the Deadly Mantis or the Mole People. Those are I've never seen the Mole People, but um, mostly for like Tarantula and the Deadly Mantis, that's more kaiju stuff. That's its own list. But yeah, I wasn't really impressed by Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, sadly. I see what they're going for with it, but I just wasn't really blown away, sadly. Also, it was too short. It's only an hour and 13 minutes. Lame. Coming in at number 13 is Ghost of Frankenstein. Speaking of Lon Chaney Jr., um, well, he's not my Lon Chaney Jr. is not my least favorite actor to play the monster. He does have the least to do, but I found this one to just be oddly somewhat entertaining. I like the beginning and ending. The beginning because of how well it picks up after Son of Frankenstein, and I like the ending because we see a full-fledged Lon Chaney Jr. actually playing the monster, whether it be through somebody else's voice, but still. The second act is when the movie really kind of drags, and this is also the shortest Frankenstein film, being only an hour and 8 minutes long. But it definitely has parts that drag, in my opinion. But Bela Lugosi is still really good as Igor, returning from the last movie. Um, and it has a decent brain swapping idea. And this was the first movie to introduce brain transplanting plot points in the Frankenstein monster series. I think every single one after this would have that, except for Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. But still, yeah, I kind of like Ghost of Frankenstein. It on paper is technically one of the weaker Frankenstein films, but I still enjoyed it. And it is nice to see the Frankenstein monster go on a rampage in a burning house. even if he is blind. Coming in at number 12, this will probably be the most controversial pick. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. This is my least favorite Abbott and Costello meet movie. I shit you not. I am unabashedly saying that. I've never seen, I think there's a fourth one. It's either Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or maybe Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff, or something. I've never seen that. I've seen Frankenstein, Invisible Man, and The Mummy for Abbott and Costello movies. So those will be on here. But yeah, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is my least favorite of the three. I think it's the most overrated. But the main thing, I don't like that. So Abbott and Costello are doing their usual funny comedic shtick, but then the monsters here are playing it serious and straight. And for me, those elements just don't jive. They mix like water and oil. There's not really enough room for Abbott and Costello to play around and play off the monsters. Them doing their own goofy bullshit slapstick shtick feels isolated from the rest of the stuff going on with the monsters. It is cool to see Bela Lugosi return as Dracula after 17 years. I like the cartoon style animation for the transformation scene of Dracula turning into a bat. I like the fun, goofy, campy tone. And I like Lon Chaney Jr. returning as the Wolfman. The fight between the Wolfman and Dracula is played for goofy laughs, and it's kind of stupid, but it is kind of cool still. And once again, I do think the monster is the weakest element of the film. Um, Glenn Strange's most involved performance as the monster, he still doesn't have much to do. Man, for the fucking Frankenstein series, really dropped the ball in using the Frankenstein monster. The fuck? Um, it is a funny movie. I just think it's very overrated. I don't think it's as great as other people make it out to be, including my best friend Victoria, who has this in like her top 5 favorite Universal monster movies. Sorry, I just don't think it's that great. Um, Speaking of which, coming in at number 11 is Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man. This one was better because the idea of invisibility lends itself well to slapstick comedy. And when it works in this movie, it's quite funny. Watching Abbott and Costello try to order dinner while having the invisible man fucking with them the entire time, picking stuff up and eating it, eating spaghetti invisibly. It's funny. And during the boxing match of Costello flailing his arms around like one of the Three Stooges, but then having the invisible man in the ring actually boxing his opponent, it is comedic gold, to quote James Rolfe. But what kills this movie, it reuses so goddamn much stock footage from previous Invisible Man movies. Footage is taken from, I believe, Invisible Man Returns, Invisible Man's Revenge, and probably a little bit of the original Invisible Man movie, too. It's blatant, jarring, and obvious every time that it's on screen, especially if you marathon all of these movies. It's very easy to recognize stock footage from previous Invisible Man movies. It's lame. But yeah, this one was funnier. Um, just not quite as great as I was hoping it was going to be. All right, now we're in top 10 territory. This is when things are going to start to get really fun. Coming in at number 10 is Bride of Frankenstein. This was a damn solid, or this is a pretty damn solid movie. I do think that Bride of Frankenstein is a bit on the overrated side. So many people hail this as being the best Universal monster movie. I can see why. It is a massive improvement over the original Frankenstein. It sticks closer to the novel. It does more with the characters. It has a better sense of humor. It flushes out more of its original characters. And it expands on the monster wonderfully. Boris Karloff truly shines as the monster in this movie. This is the closest they came to the monster reaching his full potential as a three-dimensional character, especially given the fact that the monster is allowed to speak in this movie, which supposedly Boris Karloff was very much against, but that makes no sense because the monster speaks in the novel as well. So why was that an issue? Um, and yeah, Boris Karloff really does get to be able to show off his vocal charisma, not quite as much as the mummy, but him being able to speak really does help in showcasing the monster as a three-dimensional character. Where the movie kind of falters for me, though, as well as being on the overrated side, it retroactively introduces a big problem that I think the rest of the Frankenstein series never really recovered from, because this one introduced the monster being able to speak, but then he's mute for the rest of the series until Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, and he only says, "Yes, my master," 3 times throughout the movie. Introducing the monster being able to talk and then taking that away, I think really hampers the monster as a three-dimensional character. In my opinion, for the rest of the series, he's kind of just he ranges from being a glorified plot device to being just a background plot device for the rest of the series, especially in movies like House of Frankenstein and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. The monster in those movies are just pathetically underused. But the main problem that I have with this movie, I do think it's too short. And the titular Bride of Frankenstein is only in the movie for barely 5 minutes. And she doesn't do anything except just jerk her head around like a bird and hiss and scream and then die. Never mentioned again for the rest of the franchise. Lame. Bride of Frankenstein is a good movie, though. Colin Clive is great as Henry Frankenstein. Ernest Thesiger is really good as Dr. Pretorius. And the true spectacle of the movie to watch is Boris Karloff as the monster. He's great. Coming in at number 9 is The Invisible Man Returns. Yeah, this being my favorite Invisible Man movie. Um, the main highlight of this movie, it is a solid sequel to the original Invisible Man, but the main highlight is the amazing special effects, which have actually improved since the original movie. Not to say that they were bad, but 7 years allowed, because the original Invisible Man was 1933. This movie came out in 1940. Um, 7 years allowed them to much more perfect the idea of an invisible man walking around. Well, no, it's refreshing to have this one be have a happy ending, but it does feel a bit mean spirited by the end of the film. Um, I do still think this movie is too short, but the true highlight of this movie is a very young Vincent Price as the Invisible Man in this movie. He's very, very, very good. He's very sympathetic, very likable, very believable in the role, and just a lot of fun to watch. It's Vincent Price. How can you go wrong? Come on now. Coming in at number 8 is the 1932 Mummy. The highlight truly of this movie is Boris Karloff as Imhotep. He is so fun to watch. He's very alluring, very captivating, very dreamy, and very just entertaining to watch. He's spooky, he's creepy, he's imposing, he's intimidating. Boris Karloff as the mummy is great. It does show off a lot of really good technical advances over Dracula and Frankenstein, and especially Dracula, by having a little bit more of a musical score, more interesting camera work, and slightly more flushed out characters. It is nice to see Edward Van Sloan come back once again as a very Van Helsing esque type character. It falls apart once again in its ending, just feels very abrupt and kind of lame. It's not a very rewatchable movie, and it doesn't have that much action in it. But man, is it entertaining to watch Boris Karloff as Imhotep. Good movie. Coming in at number 7 is House of Frankenstein. This feels very much like a special occasion for the Frankenstein series because it groups all three of the super famous monsters from the Universal horror cycle in one movie: Dracula, the Frankenstein monster, and the Wolfman. It fails on the Frankenstein side of things because, god damn, does this movie have the worst utilization of the Frankenstein monster of the entire series. Oop, okay. But yeah, this movie does not use the Frankenstein monster well at all. He is revived in the last 5 minutes of the movie. He picks up Boris Karloff as the evil mad scientist, is chased by the angry townsfolk, and then sinks into the swamp. Dead. End of movie. Lame. But the opening 25 minutes featuring John Carradine as Dracula is like a nice little short movie before the main plot with the Wolfman and the monster. It's entertaining, but it feels very isolated from the rest of the series. That's one thing that House of Dracula does better than this movie. It incorporates Dracula into the story a bit more. But the stuff with Dracula in House of Frankenstein feels extremely isolated and shut off from the rest of the series or from the rest of the movie. And then the rest of the movie is all about the Wolfman. Once again, though, it does feel like a very good third film in the Wolfman series. Um, Probably Lon Chaney Jr.'s second best performance as the Wolfman, in my opinion. Yeah, it's great. Uh, House of Frankenstein is, yeah, kind of a special movie. It's like it's a main event level movie. It's the unification of the three famous monsters, and it's pretty damn good. And it also does serve as a nice closure for the Frankenstein series due to the fact that the main villain, Dr. Niemann, is played by Boris Karloff, and he's a damn fine villain in this movie. Yeah, House of Frankenstein's a fun movie. Coming in at number 6 is the original Wolfman. This is a pretty damn solid movie. It has a very good cast: Lon Chaney Jr. as Larry Talbot, Claude Rains as Sir John Talbot, Bela Lugosi plays a small role as Bela the Gypsy. Maria Uspenskaya is great as the gypsy woman Mileva. This has a great cast, great music, great cinematography, great creepy forest sets, great introduction of werewolf lore, much better than Werewolf of London. Um, a classic story of Beauty and Beast and tragedy, I should say. Um, the movie does drag a little bit in its middle act, but the third act is classic angry villagers with guns and torches and a tragic downfall ending. But the first act, especially, is one of my favorite opening acts in any classic Universal monster movie. It's creepy, it's mysterious, it's alluring, um, it's spooky. I love it. The Wolfman is a damn solid movie. Coming in at number 5 is The Mummy's Hand. My now second favorite mummy movie. The Mummy's Hand is a very fun movie. As a fan of the Brendan Fraser mummy movies, the first film in particular, it takes Imhotep from the original 1932 mummy film, but the overall plot of this movie does feel like it had the most influence on the 1999 mummy film. So, seeing a diet version of that back in 1940, I can get behind that. I like it. Um, Great blending of horror, spookiness, and humor, fun characters, great introduction to a new kind of mummy, great showcasing of a different kind of mummy. Overall, The Mummy's Hand is a really fun movie. Uses a bit too much archive footage, but still, The Mummy's Hand is a fun movie. Fuck my nose. Excuse me. Coming in at number 4 is Revenge of the Creature, the second creature from the Black Lagoon movie. Kind of feels like, hold on. Okay. Yeah, Revenge of the Creature kind of feels like it's the movie that Jaws 2 took a lot of inspiration from. That's okay though. It's a very solid continuation of the original creature from the Black Lagoon. It does reuse a little bit of stock footage for its underwater scenes and its ending. It uses the exact same shot for the ending. But this movie delivers on the concept of the Gill Man going on a rampage in civilization, throwing over cars, ripping his way through nightclubs and gates, taking people and just throwing them across a fucking football field, smashing them into trees, clawing people to pieces, and running off with the chick. It's like a fun monster movie. The Gilman suit looks somewhat inferior in this movie, but it still looks consistent from the previous film. He still looks cool. He still looks like, yep, that's the creature from the Black Lagoon. That's the Gilman, definitely. Um, Not much to say about Revenge of the Creature. It kind of just is a typical monster sequel. It does have a bland human cast. They're just kind of purely functional, in my opinion. But as a sequel to Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's still a fun flick. If you want to watch this movie for the creature, you do get plenty of screen time with him, so that's good. Coming in at number 3 is Son of Frankenstein. This is a very special movie. This is overall of the entire Frankenstein series, the one that reaches its potential the very most. Its hour and 40-minute runtime certainly does help in making it feel more like a complete cohesive movie. It has an excellent portrayal of the son of Frankenstein, played by Basil Rathbone, and an excellent performance by Bela Lugosi as the wicked, nasty Igor. And he really does upstage Boris Karloff in this movie. And while Boris Karloff is better in this movie than he was in the original, taking away his ability to speak does feel like a bit of a spit in the face and like a retread of his character or a regression of his character. He is still fun to watch, and he does some really good um acting with his face and his body language. So it's kind of a mixed response from me. I don't like that they never let the monster speak again until Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, but Son of Frankenstein just overall is a very damn special, solid movie. Lots of fun to be had here. Coming in at number 2 is Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. This is my favorite of the three. This is just a funny ass movie. I think this is the funniest Abbott and Costello movie. It's very slappy or very slapsticky, very goofy, very rambunctious, very high octane, very fast, very quickly paced, very funny, very entertaining movie. It doesn't take itself seriously in the slightest. It's not scary in the slightest. It has no sense of being spooky or creepy or what have you. This is just a full out and out comedy. But you know what? It is funny and I love it. Hey, the meat's on fire, punk. Hey, the meat's still on fire, punk. Yeah, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. It's goofy, slapsticky, comedic gold fun. I love it. And coming in at number one, my favorite of all classic Universal monster movies is the original Creature from the Black Lagoon. Whenever I think of classic Universal horror movies, truly the one that instantly comes to mind is the legendary Gillman, the creature from the Black Lagoon. This is my favorite of all 30 of these movies. I love the living fuck out of this movie. It's very well made, especially for its time. The Gill Man himself is my favorite of all the classic Universal monsters. I love his design. I love his roars. I love his music. I love his rampages. Watching him tear ass his way through every one of these movies is the highlight of the movie. It is a classic tragic story of Beauty and Beast done right. Um, yeah, Creature from the Black Lagoon is a very special movie. It's a shame that I never put this in my top 100 favorite films because I truly do think, even though this once again does have a very anticlimactic, lame ending, I still love the original Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's a very, very fun, very special movie. It was technically the very first classic Universal monster movie that I ever owned. Not classic, from the classic series. Creature was the very first one I ever owned and saw from beginning to end, not counting the Wolfman. I never finished the Wolfman as a kid. Um, so yeah, that'll about do it. This was a lot of fun to do. I am very thank you once again to my dear friend Victoria for getting me this for my birthday. I know you're watching. Uh I'm very thankful to finally have this in my collection. This is going to be one of my big crowning jewels in my movie collection. I will proudly display it on my movie shelf. This is a nice treat to have. I love it. But as I said, this is going to be part one of a very special duology of Universal videos. Tune in tomorrow as I do a ranking of modern Universal monster movies, including some remakes of these movies. But yeah, join me tomorrow for that. That's the one I'm looking most forward to seeing. Or doing, I should say. Post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. Go out and get some Universal monster movies. They're a lot of fun. It's one of the most important eras in horror movie history, probably the most influential era in horror movie history. And yeah, go out, get your hands on some or all if you want to get this thing. It's definitely well worth it. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. And remember, listen to them. Children of the night, what music they make.